Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Reggie Middleton of BoomBustBlog.com. Reggie, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thank you. Good to be back.
All right, Reggie, let's talk about Cyprus. Have we crossed the Rubicon?
Of course it's too late. The mere thought of confiscating what should be sacrosanct liquid assets put in the bank is basically revealing to everybody exactly how far you're willing to go to fill a hole that probably can't be filled. Think about it. What is the purpose of a bank? You know, a bank is a place where you put your money to keep it safe and to hopefully get it back with potentially return on it with interest. So if you put your money in a bank and someone confiscates any amount at any level, is the bank still a bank? The entire banking industry has now changed.
But Reggie, we should have been warned because remember during the MF Global crisis, the depositors, the account holders, were made subordinate suddenly to the creditor, J.P. Morgan or Jamie Dimon, completely in an illegal fashion. They broke the law and they went ahead of their customers and they essentially stole $1 billion. So that was really the warning shot, wasn't it? That the rules have changed, that no deposit is safe anymore.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the rules have changed. You know, the rules have been revealed. You know, they probably always have been the same. What is interesting is the fact that the banking system in the EU area is so fragile to begin with. And anybody who came up with this idea obviously doesn't understand bank finance. You know, the most ubiquitous, the most important, and the most fleeting of all banking finance sources is the depositor, because they can withdraw their money at an instant's notice, or they should be able to. And that is the money that is the most fleeting and at the same time the greatest. So if you're going to stab anybody in the back, it should be the bondholders over, you know, the deposit holders. But the deposit holders are thought of as to be less powerful.
And this has been the story since 2007, 2008, when this global financial crisis first hit. There's all the central banks, all the policymakers, Barack Obama, David Cameron, all the world leaders have bent over backwards to protect the bondholders by imposing all kinds of bailout schemes, restructuring schemes, quantitative easing schemes to protect bondholders. Now they're just stealing money from depositors to pay bondholders. Going back 60, 70 years, isn't this fascism?
It appears to be. It's also, you know, self-defeatist. When you have depositors flee a bank, or the thought that they would flee the bank, you have the confidence in that bank weakened. Once the confidence in the bank is weakened, the counterparties to that bank then pull their support out assets. Nobody wants to face a bank as a counterparty if they think that bank's primary funding source, which are depositors, are going to run. Depositors are guaranteed to run if you tell them, I'm taking your money.
Now, what about the mainstream media? For example, you know, you're in the blogosphere, but you're now emerging as the go-to guy in the high-tech space, and we'll get to that in a minute with your calls on Apple and Google and the rest, and you've really emerged as one of the premier tech analysts really in the country. But what about the mainstream, like a New York Times, for example, Aaron Sorkin writing that, well, it doesn't really matter that the money was stolen from depositors, it's all good. I mean, aren't they to some degree also responsible for this soft fascism?
I'm going to say something that a lot of mainstream media guys are not going to like. I mean, they're reporters, okay? Most reporters are not analytical by profession or sometimes by nature. So they say something that might, on its face, appear to be extremely ignorant, okay? But in essence, could actually simply be wrong, okay? Either way, once someone important says it, it tends to be repeated by those who simply follow the flow, and then you have something that may be ass backwards, but is stated.
But that's propaganda. That's propaganda. They're pushing a line, okay? Yeah. Let's talk about the Cypress story, how it'll impact bank runs in Europe. You know, last time you were on the show, you were talking about France. France already had trouble, people trying to get money out of the bank, and they changed the rules in terms of how much you could get per withdrawal. They're already tightening the screws on depositors. How does the map in Europe look? Who's next after Cyprus? How does it all shake out? Your thoughts?
Well, Cyprus is a catalyst. This is something that I believe was going to happen anyway. The bank runs actually did happen. It's just that the depositors were a backstop, were prevented from taking but so much money out. The real bank run for the larger banks are going to be the counterparty runs. Cyprus brings it as a catalyst, and it makes it very difficult to guess the direction. I could definitely say it will happen. As to where it's going to happen first, it's hard to tell. My guess would be and I can't say it now because I'm still working on a project, but I've found several banks outright guilty of fraud. You know, assets in Europe, assets appear on the central bank's balance sheet. The same assets appear on 6 or 7 of these other banks' balance sheets.
But in London, they call that rehypothecation, and it's legal.
Okay, well, I have the documents that show that it's not legal because the documents have negative pledge clauses, and it's very clear. Now, the documents, of course, have went missing now, but
just to be clear, you're saying that banks in Europe have pledged the same collateral multiple times in illegal fashion, above and beyond any possible adherence to even a rehypothecation scheme. So it's
rehypothecation should not be possible if you've already pledged it because you have to own it to hypothecate it.
okay. Now, what about Italy? The economist at Commercial Bank suggests the pages of Handelsblatt that Italy should also take a 15% cut of deposits, and there are Italian depositors there. Should Italians take this threat seriously? What do you think? What do you think?
I dare them. I like to see it happen. That makes good TV. Just get your extra bag of popcorn.
But,
you know,
but when you take, you don't know who these depositors are. What if, Italy is famous, obviously, for its organized crime families. So if you take the 15% of somebody, down in Sicily or Naples or somewhere like this, from what I understand, these are centers of organized crime. Isn't there a risk of retribution? Are we going to find bankers whacked?
Well, it increases employment because then you hire people to start your car in the morning. So, there's always a plus and a minus. To give you an example of what happened in Cyprus, okay, Cyprus allegedly is going to take a levy, basically take money from deposit holders, and in exchange they're going to give them bonds backed by the revenue output of their gas mine. Their gas mine ownership is not necessarily theirs because Turkey is disputing ownership of it, okay? Turkey versus Cyprus. Turkey has a standing military, Cyprus doesn't. Turkey has more geopolitical power versus Cyprus, okay? It's a good chance that Cyprus is not in strong standing, yet they're going to pledge revenues to these bonds. Add to that, let's assume that Cyprus does somehow outmuscle Turkey. These are gas mines that are not developed. There are no standing pipelines to Turkey or to Crete or to get to the rest of Europe. So it has to be built out. It has to be built by a country that's being bailed out, that is actually stealing from its own depositors to fund a bank bailout and a bailout from the ECP. So basically, what you're doing is you're pledging something you don't own that you can't afford to build out to justify taking money from people who trusted the banking system. What they've done is they've outright destroyed trust in the banking system. It's confidence that allows the banking system to run, because no bank standing in the world has the liquid assets to pay its depositors all at once, which is the definition of a bank run. So this is very interesting. Once the confidence is destroyed in Cyprus, where does it go next? I wouldn't have much confidence in much of the core of Europe outside of maybe two countries and most of the pig states.
Okay.
And I'll go into specifics later on in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Let's move over to London and the London whale. You say Ben Bernanke is to blame. How so?
Okay, Ben Bernanke is the catalyst. Of course, greed is to blame, but Ben Bernanke dropped interest rates to zero. They kept them to zero. The bank business model is I take money, I have $1 of equity, I borrow $10 of capital, in debt, and then I go and do business with it. Usually, I loan you money, right, at my cost, and then you pay money back. Now,
right, you're saying it's a moral hazard. In other words, cheap interest rates, quantitative easing, 0% interest rates make the cost of crime cheap, and the moral hazard just grows exponentially because nobody's reining them in. There's no regulations. They say, okay, here we are in London Whale. We're supposed to be at no proprietary trading for the Volcker rule. We'll bypass that law. We'll make these risky bets. We'll get bailed out by the government anyway. And so you're saying low interest rates, not only do they deprive savers of income and deprive the economy of that economic activity, but it just feeds criminality, right?
Well, and also it causes criminals to reach farther. Once you're hungry, you do more things for food. So, it's not just the savers who are not getting return on the investment, it's the banks. So the banks have to do more aggressive business to get that extra yield.
Right, so the low interest rates not only deprive savers of income, but that also deprives banks of income, so they take even riskier bets.
Right.
Now, what about Mark Carney? They're bringing him in from Bank of Canada to run the Bank of England in a couple of months, with this idea of getting the house in order. The only possible outcome of this, I think, would be some massive money printing and more quantitative easing and more inflation coming to the UK. How do you see it?
Well, it doesn't matter who the, chair of the bank is. Countries get revenue 3 different ways. You can print it, right? You can generate it through economic activity, okay, or you can tax it, okay? And those rules don't change. You know, they could put me in as the Bank of England chair. There's not much I can do different. What I might do is start cutting some of the, you know, what I would consider fraudulent activity and waste out. But if you do that, you run into political problems. So, you know, it doesn't matter who you bring in. You know, you could bring in, you name it, you know, and you still have the problems. The best way and the most efficient way to cure the central bank's problem is to flush out the unproductive assets. In order to do that, you have an oligarchical.
You have to take real losses. Bondholders would have to take losses.
Right.
And but that's not going to happen. Instead, they're going to steal from depositors.
So, exactly.
All right, let's talk about the technology space. You made one of the best calls of the decade. Sell Apple at 700, buy Google.
Well, thank you.
Nobody else was making that call at the time. One of the best calls of the past 10 years by far. Now let's talk about Apple a little bit. Moody says Apple's cash hoard could hit 170 billion this year. Is that, what's going on there? Tell us.
Well, Apple is saving money as a call option on the future. That's basically what it is. Their cash hoard is a call option on future volatility. The problem is, as cash, if I were Apple management, I would start taking that cash and I would spend it on developing cloud infrastructure immediately. And I would spend it on R&D for their hardware, because Apple has essentially lost the race once it comes to mobile handsets. You know, that's not available to the populace for several years out. But if you take a look at a high-end Android handset and take a look at a high-end Apple handset, it's such a big disparity. It's not going to be, it can't be closed within one cycle.
Okay, so you're saying Apple needs to build out the infrastructure in the cloud and get away from gadgets?
Well, no, they have to build out the infrastructure in the cloud and they have to improve their gadget. But the problem with the gadgets is, right now, you heard it here, hardware is dead. The margin on gadgets are shrinking and will shrink and continue to shrink, just like they did in PC hardware. You know, at one time with the IBM PC, the AT computer, you had very, you know, wide margins. The same thing with the Apple.
All right, Google recently, I believe they bought Motorola, right? Or
right.
Part of Motorola.
They bought the whole thing and then sold pieces off.
Okay, at the time they were saying that was a bad idea. How is that going?
Well, it's the same thing Google did with YouTube, with the Gmail, with Grand Station, which is now Google Voice. What Google is doing is they're taking several industries and they're using those industries to further their ad revenue business model. What they're going to do specifically, and I could mark out Google's map specifically, they're going to take the Motorola hardware OEM, they're going to offer very high-end hardware at a very subsidized price. Basically, you go buy a high-end handset for what you pay the subsidized rate for Samsung, but have to be locked into a 2-year contract. And they're going to change the business model, because soon Samsung and Google are now in competition directly, because Samsung is trying to fork Android. So what Google's going to do is they're going to attack the Samsung business model by going after their margins. So they're going to offer diversity, just like if you go to a Dell website right now, you could build your own computer, or the memory, hard drive, etc.
Dell, they still in business? All right, Reggie, you're going to have to cut it there. Thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Okay, you're very welcome.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Reggie Middleton of Boom Bust Blog. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.